Sean, that the surface seemed to be a bit more lumpy. You know, the actual road surface looked different from the Alps. Is there a difference? The actual surface of the tarmac or the grit on it?
Well, the surface, yes, it is a bit heavier usually. Normally in the Pyrenees, normally you get very, very warm weather, and the road is very, very heavy, and the tire to be melting. But today it's cooler, so it's better conditions.
We're looking at what's left of the original breakaway group that hammered over the top of the Col de Joux. That was after a 68-kilometre break there. Vunrikov has been riding very strongly indeed, quite surprising when one considers. I don't know though, Sean, when we see Vunrikov going up the front now, the US players are going to chase him down. Do you think that was a deliberate tactic of the telecom team to send him up there? Because there we can see the pink jersey of the telecom team hanging on behind the US players. Well, Vunrikov isn't too well placed on the overall cascade. He's 22nd at 29.06. But bear in mind, that's back from Francois Simon, who is the overall leader in yellow jersey. And in reality, Lance Armstrong at 13 minutes this morning. It means there's only 16 minutes between Armstrong and Vunrikov. So presumably, I'd like your opinion of this one, they've got to chase Vunrikov to move up. What do you think?
Yes, definitely. They can't leave Vunrikov go down the road in this group because, it's growing all the time. There's other riders coming across, and as we see, like we had, we had six plus riders there in that leading group, and there's other riders coming across to it. So it's a dangerous one. They cannot allow that to get an advantage of 2 or 3 minutes with Vunrikov in it, because he's going to move up in the general, and then he.
Well, we appear to have lost David and Sean once again. Our sincere apologies. These things do happen, of course. It's a very complex arrangement to bring you live on the spot coverage from the Tour de France, and it's a different setup every day. Well, same equipment, but remember, every day, all the equipment and the commentating booths in those three big double-decker wagons that David described from time to time, they've all got to be disassembled, all the wiring taken down and transported to the next stage finish every day, and inevitably things can go wrong. So our apologies that we've lost David and Sean yet again. So here I am being pressed into service yet again. Well, never mind. I'm just happy like you are to be able to see these pictures coming through live, keeping my fingers crossed we don't lose the pictures as well, as we get a nice close-up view here of David Echevarria. One of the two Echevarrias, no relation. I've repeatedly been asked, are they brothers? There's Unai Echevarria, David Echevarria, but they are not related in any way, so far as I know anyway. David Echevarria is a Spaniard, and Unai Echevarria, who just happens to have the same name, he comes from South America, from Venezuela actually, and it's just fortuitous now that they happen to be in the same team. Paolo Bettini getting some useful advice, I'm sure, from the Mappitin car. So, these two here, Cardenas, the Kelme rider there, Kelme Costa Blanca Eurosport, remember they have the Eurosport logo on their jerseys, together with Patrice Algon, former holder of the King of the Mountains jersey in this tour. It seems like ages ago now. There's Algon back in the peloton. It's still mostly US Postals, isn't it, trying to control things at the front, as Bettini comes to the top of this climb to take maximum points up this second category climb. It's the Col de Coudon, 883 kilometres. Kilometres? What am I talking about? Meters above sea level. They've now covered 113, or he's covered anyway, the others haven't yet. He's covered 113 kilometres of today's 166.5 kilometres of this stage. Well, Bettini's got a little chance now to momentarily take a breather anyway, as the road doesn't go down too much. There's scarcely a descent at all here. A bit of a false flat, and then it actually climbs up higher. To give you a bit of an example, it's rather strange that this second category climb doesn't have a descent, and yet there are two third category climbs, lesser climbs, still to come. And the peloton at 4 minutes now. Various chasers at lesser intervals, but the peloton now 4 minutes behind Bettini, who's already gone over the top of the climb. Yeah, the second category climb you've just seen Bettini go over, 883 metres, and yet the next two climbs are only classified third, and yet they're much higher. The Col des Sept Frères, the Col of the Seven Brothers, is 1,253 metres, and the Col du Chiula is 1,431, and yet they're only classified thirds. Probably because they're fairly shortish climbs, albeit to higher points, but they're not particularly long. Now then, Bobby Julik, did I see, has managed to get himself up with Algon, Odriozola, Sastre. Well, they're putting Bobby Julik's name up there. I didn't see him get up, my apologies for that. I've been having all sorts of information coming over my headphones. Just to reiterate, one of the bits of news I got, which was not such good news, was the news about two crash victims. Sergei Ivanov is in hospital, the Fassa Bortolo rider, and I don't know about Bram de Groot. He must have been the rider we saw very, very briefly lying on the wrong side of some Armco. Bram de Groot, the Rabobank rider, sadly, we understand he has been seriously injured. If we do get any more news, obviously, we'll attempt to bring it to you. But my computer is refusing to update anything since Roux and Algon went over the Col de Joux, which is now some considerable time ago. So I'm fighting a bit blind here, so bear with me. We are having a few problems. Now then, look at the time gap at the bottom. Bettini went over the top over 2.5 minutes ago. You're looking at, in the orange jersey, David Echavarria, and in the Kelme jersey, that's Cardenas, I think. Yes, it is. So Cardenas and Echevarria. Now, were they next over the top, or did our cameras miss? I was just about to say, did our cameras miss Stuart O'Grady? But Stuart O'Grady, of course, has come back from Bettini, and he looks as though he's been caught by somebody else. He's not on his own. If the camera just pans back, I see. Right. Cardenas and Echevarria have caught O'Grady. O'Grady then now tucking in behind. I'm not quite sure which order they went over, those three guys there in your picture on the top. Relatively unimportant at this stage because they're all well down in the King of the Mountains competition. But in terms of the race as a whole, this is good news for O'Grady because he's managed to get over the second category climb still well clear. Now, Bettini, O'Grady, Cardenas. In fact, O'Grady was still in second place, but that's a King of the Mountains. It's really the sprint points competition that he's after, and he's still got a bit of a way to go to the next sprint, but he's now in a much better position to get some points at the next sprint point at Belclair, which comes after 129.5 kilometres. just to go back to the points competition. At the moment, he's just got 9 points lead on Eric Zabel for the green jersey, which Zabel, of course, has won no fewer than 5 times in succession, beating Sean Kelly's record, which was 4. Stuart O'Grady has 136 points, Eric Zabel 127. The next one is Damien Nazon, the Bonjour sprinter, who has 90, but he's not anywhere up with any of these leaders. 50 kilometres to go for Bettini to the finish. So O'Grady has a possibility here now of going for this next sprint, having got over the 2 main climbs, not counting the one right at the finish, the 2 main climbs before the second sprint. He's now in a position possibly to pick up some more sprint points. Paolo Bettini still riding ever so nicely, all on his own at the front. Now, of course, we're almost in Spanish territory here, aren't we? And a lot of the Basque supporters out to watch their favourites. And of the Spanish riders who are not too far from their home country, Jose Babalocchi, of course, who's 4th overall. He's the best placed rider. Igor Gonzalez Galdiano in 7th place. Oscar Sevilla in 8th place overall. 5th in that mountain time trial. Smashing little ride from the under-25 rider. It's given him the young rider jersey. Serrano at 25 minutes. Manchebo, who was last year's best young rider, he's down in 15th place. Gutierrez in 18th, Sastre 19th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Spanish riders in the top 20. Churro down in 24th place. So pretty good showing by the Spanish when you consider that the majority, the biggest number of riders from any nation, of course, is the French, who've got about 50 riders in this race, as opposed to the Spaniards, who've not got anything like that number. So the Spaniards, as you might have expected when they got near to the Pyrenees, of course, out in force here and trying their best to give their fans something to shout about. 2 of them out in front there, and Stuart O'Grady now has just got to try and hang on here to these 2, because the road from here to that sprint point is probably, I've got it in front of me here, it's just a tough little false flat for the next few kilometres, dragging up all the while. And there is Bobby Julich, who we didn't actually see Julich's sprint from the peloton up to this break, did we? But now we can see for ourselves that the 3rd placed rider in the Tour de France of 1998 is up with the leaders, as we now get an aerial view of the head of the peloton, Lance Armstrong, right up there with 1, 2, 3, I'm looking at the US Postals, 4, there's got to be at least 5 of his teammates around him there, making sure, attempting to control things, which has not been easy, as we've discussed on this tour so far, attempting to control things and make sure that these leaders don't get too far ahead. Just looking down my list on the overall standings to just check on which one of them, in fact, is the highest placed on overall classification. You see, Stuart O'Grady is actually the best placed on overall. He's 21 minutes down on the leader, which means he's 8 minutes down on Lance Armstrong, who in turn, of course, is 13 minutes behind Simon. Are you still with me? Pay attention, there'll be questions later. So a difference on general classification of about 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes between Armstrong and O'Grady. So it seems strange that O'Grady could be seen to be in a fighting position for the yellow jersey again after the 2 high mountains when he lost all that time. But unless the US Postal Service continues to be vigilant and watches the time checks that are put up on the blackboard by the blackboard man, and of course they keep in radio contact, as they do these days, with their team managers back in the team cars, the US Postal have got to fight to keep this break at manageable proportions. They can afford to let it go up to 4, 5, maybe even 6 minutes, but if it gets any more than that, then alarm bells will start to sound in the ears of the US Postal boys, and they'll be told to put the hammer down and close this gap a little bit more. Certainly, though, having said that, they should get their opportunity, no disrespect to Stuart O'Grady, when they get to the last climb up to Aix-les-Thermes, where surely Stuart is going to lose ground. That's the finish of this 12th stage of this year's Tour de France. With this 12th stage of the Tour de France from Perpignan to Aix-les-Thermes, 166.5. It doesn't say that on the picture, but we're not bothered about 500 metres particularly, are we? As we see this little chasing trio now, Echevarria in the orange jersey for the Euskaltel team, leading it. Pascal Laurenti in the green jersey, well, green, white and blue shorts of the Kelmy team in second place. And Australia's very own Stuart O'Grady in third place, having been dropped by Paolo Bettini, who is now the lone leader. But this is a good situation for Stuart O'Grady. He's no real pretensions to get the yellow jersey back, to be honest. He knows, for instance, that he's going to lose time, as I was saying just before the commercial break. He will certainly lose time on Armstrong, Ulrich and the rest on the last final climb up to the finish. It's a first category climb up to Axleterme. There's the rest of the riders who've escaped from the peloton: Sastre, Odriozola, Julik, Algon and Pascal Lorente. Bobby Julik sneaking up there very quietly. We didn't see any picture of him on the attack from the front of the peloton, but somehow he did manage to bridge the gap. Remember that horrendous crash he had in the time trial back in 1999, 2 years ago. All on his own, coming down a fast descent in the individual time trial, stage 5 or 6 or 7 or whatever it was. Bang, down he went on the right-hand side of the road, and sadly Bobby was out of the Tour for that year. And he's had a bit of a quiet time ever since then, but he's gradually found his form again this year. He's not exactly set any houses on fire, but he's certainly shown form good enough to warrant his place in the Crédit Agricole team. Still looking for his first win, although a couple of good third places not too long ago. He was third on the stage in the Dauphiné Libéré race, that warm-up race for the Tour de France, and he came third in the one-day race in Switzerland, the Grand Prix Lugano, back in March. Fifth in the time trial stage of the Circuit de la Sarthe. He's always been a pretty fair time trialist, Bobby Julik, and a couple of 9th overall places in 2 tours, the Circuit de la Sarthe and the Mediterranean Tour, the Tour of Mediterranean, which is way back in February. So the form beginning to come for Bobby Julik, and I'm delighted to see that he's managed to get up to this chase group now. But still, remember, Paolo Bettini is the lone leader at the moment, the little Italian rider. And, well, don't you get the impression right now that the impetus has gone out of that chase group? Well, certainly does to me, as one of them has decided to have a go on his own. Is it the Banesto rider? Is it Odriozola? Let's have a little look when we get a bit closer to him. I suspect it is. Yes, it is. This is Odriozola, young Odriozola, who's decided to go off on his own. And the others don't seem to want to know at the moment. I wonder why. So Odriozola now on his own in 5th place. One rider on his own, 3 chasers, and then we have Odriozola. So lying 5th on the road at the moment in this 12th stage of this Tour de France, going up to the ski resort of Axleterme Plateau de Bonastre, to give it its full title. And this is very hard for everybody because they've just come off the top of that climb, no descent, and I understand that Bram de Groot is okay following that crash. He is seriously hurt on his face and elbow, but it looked worse than it was. He's out of the Tour, sadly. Bram de Groot being taken to hospital. Sergei Ivanov was taken to hospital straight away. They gave Bram de Groot some treatment at the roadside for some considerable time, fearing that the injuries were worse than, thankfully, they've turned out to be. So that's just a little bit of an update on Bram de Groot for you, the Rabobank rider. So we've lost 2 riders today as a result of crashes. And of course, earlier on, if you've just tuned in, the big shock news this morning was the sight of Christophe Moreau, the team leader for Festina, who climbing off his bike earlier on. That was very disappointing for Moreau, who was just off a podium place in Paris last year, finished 4th just behind Messrs Armstrong, Julik and Bellocchi. And I know all the French were hoping to see him on the podium. Well, I'm afraid it's not going to be this year, because Christophe Moreau is out of this race. Now, another little statistic for you. The Spanish, we've been looking at them closely since we're not far from Spain. Their performance in Pyrenean stages, well, they've always done quite well. Javier Ochoa, remember that wonderful ride he did last year to win a Pyrenean stage? Armstrong finished in 2nd when he attacked all the big names. He didn't quite catch Ochoa, though sadly Javier Ochoa may never race again after that dreadful accident early this year in which his twin brother was killed. And he was in hospital in a coma for a long time. He's back home now, incidentally, but I'm not sure whether he will ever race again. Awfully sad, terribly sad. Fernando Escartin and David Echavarria, of course, who is up front at the moment. Both won stages fairly recently, back in 1999. And Jose Maria Jimenez, who for my money looked very, very promising a rider. He finished on the podium in the Vuelta a couple of years or so ago, but seems to have just gone off the boil a bit the last year or so. He had some good placings back in 97 and 98, and he didn't perform at all well earlier this year, I'm afraid, and didn't even get a place in his team to ride in the Tour de France. So Bettini, meanwhile, ploughs on, ploughing his lonely furrow, and is this road surface suggesting there's been a little bit of rain here recently, or is it the sun shining on very ultra-smooth tarmac? I would like to think it was the latter, actually. I don't think there's been any rain here for the last day or so. If you look up there at the top of the picture, nice blue sky. And the weather forecast, which we gave earlier on, was good. Just maybe a few clouds at the finish. I don't even think that's going to happen now. It looks as though the whole of this stage is going to be run off in pretty good weather. And let's hope that the next two stages are as well, because they are both also high up in the Pyrenees. Tomorrow we've got the Saint-Lary-Soulan climb to finish off, but my goodness, what climbs they've got to go over. It's an incredibly hard day tomorrow. 194 kilometres, not the longest stage, but when you look at the territory they're going over, the profile looks just like a diagram of a shark's mouth when it opens its mouth and lets you see its teeth. You've got the Col de Porte d'Aspe, which is a second category, the Col de Monte, first category, Col du Portillon, which is first category, the Col de Peyresourde, first category, the Col de Val-Louron-Azé, which is first category, and the finish, as if that's not enough, up to Saint-Lary-Soulan, Pla d'Adet, the ski resort, another ski resort, which is hors category, out of category, even harder than the first category climb. So that's 6 classified climbs tomorrow, an incredibly hard stage. And then, of course, on Sunday, the last of the Pyrenean climbs, finishing at Les Ardiden, another classic finishing point, another hors category climb. They also go over the Tourmalet, that's hors category. And just as a sort of hors d'oeuvre to the Tourmalet and Les Ardiden on Sunday, they have a fourth, a third, a fourth, and the first category, the Col d'Aspin, even before they get to those two. Who'd be a racing cyclist? Well, that looks just like pretty well all the US Postal Service team. Well, sadly, all except Christian van der Velde, who had so many knocks, and particularly that crash with Eras in the team time trial, that he is no longer with the team. 2 minutes 15 to Echavarria, 4 minutes to the peloton. Well, it's still 4 minutes, still manageable, I suppose, and the US Postal will be well aware of that. So the Echavarria group at 2:15 on Paolo Bettini. So Bettini's still going very well, and remember the Echavarria group is actually 3 strong, isn't it? O'Grady, Cardenas and Echavarria, when I last made a little note of it. Odriozola chasing alone from the others like Sastre, Vinokurov, Algon and Bobby Julik. But Bettini now 2 minutes 15 clear of anyone else. Well, he's still certainly, I think, now going to stay clear through the sprint. I mention that because it's important so far as Stuart O'Grady is concerned. Assuming Bettini goes through the sprint on his own, he obviously will take the maximum points, 6 points. O'Grady will then be left in this little chase group to try and win this 3-man sprint, which would give him second place at the sprint. O'Grady, Echavarria, Cardenas. When it comes to sprinting, he's certainly the best of those 3. But that would only give him 4. Mind you, at this stage of the game, you know, any points you get are most welcome, and 4 points obviously extends his lead in the points competition over Eric Zabel. And I said Eric Zabel would have a job on his hands, wouldn't he, if he's to win a record 6th green jersey. Well, his 5 are themselves a record, 5 in a row, but 6 would be even better from Eric Zabel's point of view. But I suspect that Stuart Grady is continuing to have a say, and will continue to have a say in that particular section of the competition of this race, right up until the end, when the race reaches the Champs-Élysées a week on Sunday. We're getting nearer, folks, we're getting nearer. And look at that, all those blue jerseys, there's 1 or 2 bonjours, I think, in there, looking after Damien Nazon's interest, the sprinter, although it's not a sprint finish for him at all today, it's a mountain top finish. The Eurosport.com question of the day: will we see an Italian in the top 10 at the end? That's your question, a simple yes or no. Are we going to see an Italian in the top 10 at the end? That's a very good question, really, because on the overall standings at the moment, Stefano Garzelli, who won the Giro d'Italia last year, is currently the top placed Italian, and he's down in 17th place. There's Vladimir Belli lying 20. Remember, he got thrown off the Giro d'Italia for throwing a punch at a spectator. He's in 20th place at 27. So if you have any opinion on that, will an Italian make the top 10? And here's an Italian who might be on his way to a stage victory, who knows, because he's a smashing climber, and if he's still clear at the bottom of the Axe les Thermes climb, my money would be on him to carry on and win the stage. However, that's the internet question for today. Will an Italian finish in the top 10 when we get to Paris, yes or no? And remember the general classification at the moment, there is no Italian in the top 10. In fact, strictly on nationality, starting with Francois Simon, the top 10 read like this: France, Kazakhstan, that's Kovalev, USA, that's Armstrong, Spain, Germany, France, Spain, Colombia, that's Santiago Botero, last year's King of the Mountains, and Australia. That's Stuart O'Grady, of course. So those are the nations from which the current top 10 as of stage 11 and the rest day come from. And of course, that was after the stage from Grenoble to Chamrouz. That mountain time trial wasn't Armstrong awesome on those two stages in the Alps. He was just on another planet, wasn't he? He's just amazing. He just put a whole new look to bike racing up mountains altogether. He didn't quite get the I think David mentioned it, but in case you're new, you know, you've only just tuned in and you missed it, he didn't actually get the record for the climb of L'Alpe d'Huez because he didn't attack right from the bottom, not quite right at the bottom. They'd gone a kilometre or two up the climb before he looked Jan Ullrich in the eye. Wasn't that a moment, eh? He looked Jan Ullrich in the eye as if to say, I think now's the time, pal, I'm off. And then he went. Now, when Pantani set the record, just a few seconds faster than Armstrong, Pantani, I recall, he went right from the bottom and he never let up. So Pantani still has the record, the official record for the climb of L'Alpe d'Huez. I think we've got another statistic coming up. Sorry, my computer's on the blink. It's still stuck at the summit of the Col de Joux with Roux and Algon, and we've had nothing since, and I've checked with everybody else and they're all the same. So there's obviously a problem with all sorts of things emanating from the finish area of this stage. Retired riders after two mountain stages. This year it's 23, which is not bad by last year's standards when it was 26, and certainly by 1998 when it was 41, although that was exceptional because some riders had either been forced out of the Tour or simply gone home by the first two mountain stages. The 1998 Tour, remember? 1999 and 1997 were good. We only had 20 retirements by the same stage, so we're pretty well on a par for this stage of the race with previous tours. 1998 was an exception because of the unique circumstances, which I trust are not going to bedevil us again. And the Festina boys coming back to the car. What's that? Sven Teutenberg, I'm not sure. Just got a brief glimpse of it. If it was Teutenberg, he's a smashing little sprinter actually if he gets up to the finish, but not on a mountain finish, which is a bit different. There's a confirmation of the times, and the Echevarria trio now coming down from 2 minutes 15 down to 2 minutes, and the peloton still at 4, so they're making no inroads, but the little trio of Echevarria, Cardenas and O'Grady closing down a little.
Well, they really are whacking along here, the great rate of knots, and I don't forget me back there, Mike, and people listening to our live broadcast from the finish line here. Thanks for holding the fort, so they really are rapidly going across this particularly nice part of the countryside, and it's a well-known, but it's quite a high plateau, by the way. The way up above sea level, they come up from this morning at Perpignan, not far above sea level, and we're on this plateau at the moment, going along. We're coming up towards a point some 40 kilometres from the finish, and Bettini is really hoping to get some assistance from the wind. We're getting to the point now where the race begins to turn a little bit, and he could be getting some assistance, because coming up through the feed zone, they were going into the headwind, then it turned slightly, and as they're getting closer towards the back end now, the wind begins to swing behind him. You might be able to see the leaves alongside the road on the trees begin to flutter and that will show that it's getting behind him. So an amazing ride by this man Bettini on the screen. He won a stage at Tour de France last year. He also won the Liège, Bastogne-Liège, the Coupe du Monde, and he's had a very successful career since he had his first victory in 1998 on the Tour of Romandy. He's a good all-round rider when it comes to riding stages, particularly things like Tirreno Adriatico, when he's been up there and won that one too as well. So Bettini now, here comes the pursuit group. These are our riders, which Mike will be talking to you about. O'Grady in the green, Echeverria in the orange, and Cardness there in the stripy white and green and blue. So there they go then. And what if they can catch 2 minutes to this group, 4 minutes to peloton. Well, you can see it on the screen what the gap is, and really this man O'Grady, there goes the blackboard showing them what they're up to. It looks to me that we can certainly begin to accumulate more and more points in this sprint competition. When we get to Belcaire, there's 37 kilometres to go towards the finish, and then on the Col de Sept-Clair, one climber called the Tuileries. If he hangs on in there, and he certainly seems to have lasted so far, Sean, this is an amazing piece of riding. If it survives like this for a man who's looking for the green jersey, to be going like this in the mountain. I think you had some suspicion that Zabel wouldn't be as good on the undulating territory, but this is mountain territory. It's not one of your roly races, is it, today? In fact, I'll ask you a question just a moment, because I think we're going for a bit of a pause in our programme now. Well, that's the main pack which you see on your screen here, and we're heading into the Pyrenees. We started down there at Perpignan on this stage of the Tour de France. We've come up through the forest of the Upper Ord Valley and moving on now towards the finish of the stage today. It doesn't look to me really, Sean, as if the main group are too bothered about those breakaways. 4 minutes away is Bettini, 2 minutes away. Oops, there's a touch of wheels. Brashard's gone down. Not a good day then as far as they're concerned, but certainly Brashard having come down now, the only good news they would have, I suppose, is that in the King of Mountains competition, they've been going very well again today, and at the moment the jersey looks very comfortably on the shoulders of Rooks, who got the first climb of the day, which was the first category climb. Bettini won the second climb, but he's not any great threat yet on the classification for the King of Mountains, and here he is now coming up towards the second sprint. Now then, let's wait for this one to happen. Belcaire, second sprint coming up, because it looks like he'll get the 6 points and the 6 seconds. And O'Grady, who is there in the group just behind, I'm sure will come out from that group. 2 minutes to go for O'Grady coming to sight. He could do with every point he can do in the points competition. Let me update you. In the points competition, Zabel is not anywhere near the front of the pack at all. O'Grady has 136 points this morning. Zabel, 127. Nazem has 90 points in third spot. Those are the top 3 places. And when we go into the next of the points after this one, will be the sprint at the finish. I must say sprint, it's an uphill drag, and somehow they're not going to get back to O'Grady very easily. I think he's not going to give up their fight, because this point is 37 kilometres from the finish, and the next piece of action will be going over the top of the climb of the Seven Brothers, the Col de Sept-Clair. That'll be 31 kilometres from the finish, and then the Col de Tuileries, which will be 20 kilometres from the finish. Doesn't look like the bunch are too bothered at the moment. Let's see if O'Grady gets himself to the 4 points in the sprint. At the top of the climb coming up for now, because it's a pretty serious climb in the sprints, they don't get so many points in the mountains. It'll be 20 points for first, 17 for second, 15 for third, and then dropping by 2 points each. So let's see now how O'Grady goes for this one. It may only be a slender 4 points, but it could be that when we get to the front of the stages, Zabel might try and come back at him, and so he's now got to go through this one. I think the rest of the 2 mountain climbers said, OK, we'll let you take this one, providing you help us in the mountains. So O'Grady gets himself 4 points in the points competition. That one now moving on to 140 points to Eric Zabel's 127. Sean, you drove the car over the mountains ahead. We know it's a first category climb of 9 kilometres at the end of the stage today, and there's little drag just up in front of them as well, over the top of the Col de Secret. That's the next one to come, which is just 4.7 kilometres, and then the Col de Iola, which is 5.3 kilometres. What, in your opinion, is a possibility that O'Grady could stay away from the chase group today and get some more points in the points competition?
Well, it depends on what the US Postals start doing in the next 10 or 15 kilometres. If they pick it up a bit and start putting this group in, because if they do that, well, then I think they can catch everybody. Bettini, of course, he's just under 4 minutes, but they would ease into that very, very quickly. So the general classes, of course, O'Grady is the best, in 10th place at 21 minutes. But maybe they're not going to get too concerned about that. And I think if they could get the bottom of the climb with about 5 minutes, O'Grady, I think he could take some points. So we'll just wait and see in the next number of kilometers, the next 10 kilometers, we'll have a lot of we'll have the decision. And we come back on the chasing group, Xabaria and Cardenas and O'Grady, of course. We'll have to see what happens in the next number of kilometres there. But I think the group will start riding now, and there'll be other teams who will ride also. So I would see it hard being these guys staying away. Bettini, of course, on his own out there is very, very difficult, because there's quite a lot of wind out there today. So he could be caught by these three chasers, and I think if the four get together, they could, pull out a gap and maybe go on to the finish.
Well, there we are. That's confirmation that you saw on the screen here, live from Eurosport coverage of the Tour de France, as we're now then getting to a very critical part of the course, and particularly as far as this man is concerned here on your screen. It comes to the sprint. It's a little bit drag up to the top of the Col de Secret. It levels off a little bit, then goes straight up to the Col de Schule. No, it's not any what I call bus-cutting climbing. It's not until they drop down into the town of Lake Term that we then start the big serious climb of the day, which will take them up that final nearly 10 kilometres. There's your gap now. And, it looks to me that this group here, under the impetus of O'Grady, Echeverria and Carter, are beginning to pull back our lone breaker. So on this climb of the Col de Secret, beautiful countryside, by the way. You can see those lovely tiles on the tops of the houses here. When we stayed last night in the delightful town down by the Mediterranean, the sort of roofs there right outside our hotel, beating off the sun in some respects. The weather got much better yesterday. The rest day wasn't much of a rest day. It was very wet indeed. Got sun in the afternoon, but the riders would have had a miserable time if they went out their bikes a bit too early. We're looking back down the peloton now at the US Coastal team in the blue, eager to pick out, and behind is the yellow jersey, still stuck in. There is Simon, who coming into the race today, 11 minutes lead over Kibilev of the Cofidis team, the Kazakhstan rider, 11 minutes down. Lance Armstrong in the main pack here, we can just see him on your screen. He is third overall at 13 minutes and 7 seconds. If you just switch down to our programme, we go past Armstrong to Bullock and Ulrich, and in 6th place this morning, but now out of contention, is Christophe Moreau. He was 18 minutes 21 seconds down, but he's out of the race now, as is the Groot. There was a nasty crash coming off the top of the climb of the Col de Coudon. They came down the climb, and there was a very nasty crash there, and he has been taken off to hospital in a helicopter. They had to have an operation. They had to put a tube down his throat. He'd done something to his chest, and to get oxygen into his body, they had to, I think it's called a tracheotomy or something like that. When he had to stick this tube down his throat, so we're very sorry to know that he's been taken away and in some serious problems too. But the medical people are very quick. We have one helicopter. We're looking here at Lance Armstrong. One helicopter which is totally dedicated to taking people off to hospital in case they have a problem. and the planning that goes on in this race is phenomenal. You don't see it all that's happening behind the scenes. Well, there's the main pack. They don't look too bothered at the moment, with our breakaway group having gone through the sprint of 129 kilometres in Belcaire, and that was taken by Bettini, who rolled across the line just inside a couple of minutes ahead of O'Grady, who picked up the points for second spot, and Echeverria from the OSB team was in third spot and got himself 2 points. The group exactly was in fact 1 minute 40 behind Bettini at that time, and so now the peloton are trying to catch up with the breakaway group in front, particularly since there's so much at stake in this race. I'm not sure, Sean, as to whether that this little breakaway group at the moment, if we really think they've been allowed the freedom today, or the big gun's going to start the fire, so get Armstrong some time back. Because at the moment, 13 minutes and 7 seconds down on Seymour, who I think at the moment doesn't seem to be too bothered with sitting in the back of the train of the US Postals. What do you think?
Well, I think O'Grady was the most dangerous, and he was the one who maybe they didn't want to leave, take a big advantage again, like we see into Portail. Although actually I don't think we'll ever see that again in the tour for we won't see it for a number of years. But these guys are quite a bit down on General Echeverria, the 56 minutes, and Cardenas is at 1 hour 33. So and Bettini, of course, is at 1 hour 16 minutes. So these three are not any danger at all to the General. So we could see the bunch slowing down a bit. The US forces might just slacken off a bit, and they could take the advantage out again. And if they arrive to the bottom of the climb here, which I think with about 4 minutes, certainly Cardenas and Echeverria, they're quite good climbers. So it will be interesting to see what happens in the next number of kilometres, which 32 kilometres to go.
And they've just come through the Plateau de Salt, that's S-A-U-L-T, and you may have seen the lovely greenery there with the fields being cut into the side of the mountain. So you can probably look back down there, see again how they terrace the fields to grow the corn, and also to grow the grass for the animals. And these lovely fir trees you see around here, they're called the old firs, A-U-D-E firs. They're very special type, adapted to the soil. It's very much on the chalky side, and so the fir trees here that you see are quite unique to this part of the world. In fact, the Ord is a well-known territory because the Tour de l'Aude is one of the top races on the women's racing calendar. It goes about 5 or 6 days, the Tour de l'Aude, for the women, and also it's used for other races down here too. So we're heading to a territory that's well known to many of these riders, and the crowds are coming out. They're not massive by any means. There's a fair number on the final climb now, but because of the very nature of the road, they're very narrow around here. For most of the time, the biggest amount of population boost is in the winter, and you'll probably see when we get to finish here how the camels will go up and show you the town of Axlet, and you'll be able to see all the ski slopes here and the chalets where during the winter masses of people come. So look at that gorgeous countryside. There's your plateau on the left-hand side. There's your special old firs on the right-hand side as they start to move up towards the top. Not a lot of industry around here, but when we came to Quillen, I was interested to see that was once the centre of the hat-making industry, providing a bit of employment to the local people. Not so much now because hats are no longer as important to people as they used to. One time everyone had a hat, but now if you don't want to get hit, don't get a hat. So Bettini going up here will certainly, I think, get the points on top of this climb. It's only a third cat climb anyway. He's had only the point of the second cat climb. He's going to get some here, and there you can see the line, and gone beyond the little green kite, it's a red kite, and he goes down into the valley and up the other side, and that's where the finish will be today. So nice part of the world. Also, by the way, those of you who follow rugby have probably noted that this is a part of the world where rugby has been always imported. That town of Quillen has got a very strong rugby team indeed. So Bettini here grimacing and working hard to try and get away. He's typically built, by the way, for a road climber. He's just 1 metre 69. He only weighs 58 kilograms. the exact build for a climber, as is Echeverria. There, look at his little diddy bike. Shows that he's a good mountain climber. Hasn't got much to take up there. And again, the same happens, I think, also you might say, to the Kelmer rider, who's from Colombia. That's Felix Cardenas. So you've got one from Colombia, one from the Basque Country, one from Italy, and O'Grady from Australia, who's going to get tail off again. But I don't know, Sean, on from here onwards, there's only a bit of a small plateau, and we go up again. Do you think it's the moment when O'Grady's going to find himself being caught by the final bunch, or can he make it to the top? Can he make it to the finish? Because there are points down to 20th spot. But is it worth him flogging hard to try and stay away from the group, which certainly I don't think goes out with there, but is it worth flogging hard when there's 20 points and so on down here? Let's say he misses out in the first 10 places. He's only getting sort of 8 or 9 points. Is it worth riding that hard?
Well, I don't think O'Grady is, he's going for the points at the finish, because when they went through the last sprint, he took the 4 points, but then he just eased off, and I heard just over race radio that he seems to be he's easing off and waiting for the bunch, so he's not continued on with Echeverria and Cardenas. So now we just see him here now on the shot. Actually, he's been just caught by the bunch already, so he's really just slackened off and just decided to wait. He must think that, well, it's not just worth going for making the effort, because he probably feels that these two breakaway companions of these are not going to make it to the finish, so he decided just to stop and wait for the bunch.
Well, at least he got some more points in the points competition, helped himself also to some more cash in the balance. As they're coming along here with Bettini now, and there goes O'Grady drifting back into the main group. So it looks like he's had enough now. He's not trying to hang on to wheels they go past, but he's been battling all the way through, and undoubtedly he's attracting a lot of attention in Australia. Stuart's performance has really captured the imagination of those people in South Australia, particularly south of Adelaide, where he comes from. Going up then toward the top of the climb, and Bettini's already gone over it, and Cardenas, the Colombian, come up in second spot, and then David Echeverria going over into third spot. So that's the situation there. On the King of Mountains competition, the leader, Laurent Roux. Now looking back down the list here, and I can't see Bettini's name until we go a long way back, so he's going to be no problem. Behind Roux is Jalabert, 106 points. He wasn't in the frame at the first climb today. Jan Ulrich on the climbing competition is lying third with 92 points. Armstrong fourth with 91 points. They may be to close up a little bit, Ulrich and Armstrong, but certainly Jalabert won't give up there to fight. And Sean, what about the prospect of Jalabert today? I've been very pleased with his performance so far, and we are, we moved away from a bit of his part of the world, but he has ridden for the ONCE team. He speaks fluent Spanish. He's well liked by the Spaniards. Do you think this might, I won't say home territory, but would encourage him to try and close up the gap on the King of the Mountains competition?
I'm not sure if he's going to go for the mountain competition. He was trying the other day, but he didn't succeed in taking it, and I reckon that he's just going to not push himself to 100% in these stages, because he's not going to get up there in the final if it comes between the real favourites in this race up this last climb. He's not in with a chance to get up on the stage. So I feel that he's just taking it pretty easy. But I do think we'll see him in the next couple of days, where he'll be getting away in a break again when he loses a bit more time in the general, and he will be going for another stage. And I think that will be the target of Jalabert for the rest of this tour.
Well, thanks for that, Sean. Certainly, we've got two big climbing days ahead of us. Tomorrow, the stage from Poix to Saint-Laurent-Soulan, the Plat d'Adé, and we've got no less than 4 first category climbs tomorrow to contend with, and it seems that the main pack's now beginning to put a bit of pressure on here. But the 82-hour rider going up over the top of the climb at the moment. Sebastian Damarbeck has gone over there. O'Grady's now gone straight back to the bunch, and so there's just 2 riders, Echeverria and Cardenas, going after the lone figure of Bettini. We've got the Spanish champion here. There's a bit of a break-up on the peloton, and there's only a sort of continuation of the plateau here before we then go over the top of the next one, and then we go the big descent down the other side. So for now then we've got the 4 first category climbs, 1 up category climb with Saint-Marie-Soulon, and the next day again 2 up category climbs when the King of the Mountains will certainly be decided. Which after that, after a day's rest, we go to a sort of undulating stage in toward the finish in Paris. Well, that's the climbs then, the Citadel Col de Chicula. Not very hard at all then, although the 7% in the centre of this one. It goes up to 1,431 metres above sea level. That's, as you can see, only a couple hundred metres of climbing up toward the top, so it's not too bad at all. The wind is getting behind the riders now, and so I don't think it's from when we came along that it was going to cause them much trouble. It's just a wearing down process that you can see now. We're going through this lovely plateau, and in the background are the mountains falling yet to come. So off the top, and go down into the valley. 136 kilometres covered. Of the stage today, 166, so they've got 30 kilometres to go. At least Mr. Bettini here with 30 kilometres to go. He started the season quite well, by the way. He was riding in the Tour Langkawi, where his team won the overall award there. Well, we've got some tests coming up here, so Mike Smith, I think we're back in contact now, Mike, after a horrendous start today. Technicians seem to have repaired it all. Over to you, Mike, for more statistics.
Well, thanks very much indeed, David. Nice to be able to hear from you again. And this is a climb which we've been over several times over the years. These are the last 3 occasions when we've been over the top of the Col de Chicula. The last time in 1997, when Richard Virenque was on his way to one of his 5 King of the Mountains jerseys that he's won in recent times. The great Rick Van Looy was first over the top way back in 1965 for the Belgians, and the Italian Pezzi way back in 1955 was first over the top.
Well, we are back with the race. We may getting so up and down in our commentary sound. I don't know what it is, but an aeroplane went through here. We're using our mobile phones here at the moment. Goodness knows what it's going to cost Eurosport, because the landline phones went on the blink, and we lost also the commentary landlines to Paris. And you can see here Guterres, Bartoli, Demarbex. So we're beginning to get a bit of a group together now. They've caught up with Bettini. Now I think he'd be glad to get some help here, but if things are going on the blink back there, do bear in mind that it's the right up in the Pyrenees, and sometimes difficult to link everything up as we would wish to do. So my apologies for that. It certainly seems to me that this group here, the main group, containing just everybody who's anybody except Moreau, because Christophe Moreau has retired from the race. We don't know yet. I heard my French colleagues trying to find out what happened to him, but he's retired from the race. Bram Begui came down in the crash and has been helicoptered off to hospital. We wish him well on the recovery, but most of the riders here are still in this compact group. We've had quite a few flurries during the day. This morning, after 40 kilometres at Cadiz, the Lotto rider Bagwet was the first over the line. The AG2 rider Bocharov was second, and for Bonjour, Bruce was third. That was after 40 kilometres this morning on this stage from Perpignan to Aix-les-Thermes, a total distance of 166.5 kilometres, and by coincidence we had 166 riders start this morning, and they came along here to the route which is going to take them into Aix-les-Thermes. The last time we came here was in 1965, and the first time way back in 1933. Well, they gave us the fact that Bettini caught us, and that Bettini had been caught by somebody else. It's not so at the moment, because he's still out on his own, and so he's solely on to try and win this stage. And the last time we came here was in 1965, and the first time we came here was in 1933. So it's been a bit spread out over the years, the run in here. It's very quick. the first time I hit 33, because the following Lafferty came in after Ertz had won it in 1933. Then there was a bit of a gap for 3 years to Canado. Then a long gap before we had the Italian in 1955, Pezzi take the stage, Bulls in 1957, and a long wait then to Raybrook in 1965, and here we are now after a long wait getting the race here to the finish. Third category climb, the Col de Tuella, not a difficult one as you can see, and from here on it's straight down into the valley, into a term, and then straight up the other side to the finish where a big crowd has now started to gather. We've had 2 riders still going after them, after Lone Bettini. And I should think, Sean, looking at the way as we now come through here, that the acceleration of that main pack, because it's coming down very quickly indeed. Do you think there's any chance of these 3 staying away now, or because we just go? Bettino's very determined indeed to me, but are they likely to start to really attack that down? And if so, just give the viewers your opinion of the climb, because it looks a bit naughty towards the end.
Yes, it is a difficult climb, and Bettini is he's definitely concerned about the 2 chasers, because the perfect situation for him would be to wait for like Chavarria and Cardenas, but when they arrive in the final climb, well, Bettini is not going to be able to match them in the climb, so that's why he's forging on, and he just cannot wait for them, because he knows he's going to be beaten.
Kommt eine Attacke von beide wurde groß nach der zweiter Platz, ein dritter Platz, so ist was sind 4 Stunden eigentlich. Hier müssen attackieren, aber der Manager, sportliche Leitung hat die Disziplinare Eigenverantwortung eigentlich, was nicht heißt,
well, we're 25 kilometres to go now. The reason I had to pause then was that we're getting 2 French boys here at the moment. Sorry to back at home. It's now gone very quiet, so let's hope that we're allowed to keep doing so. But we had 2 French voices for the price of 1 in our headphones, and our telephone. So let's hope we're not going to clog up anything with continuing with our commentary here. So they're going down off the top of the penultimate climb of the day, the leaders, with Bettini still out there in front, Echevarria and Cardenas doing nothing really to close the gap down. It's got down to about 1 minute and 25 seconds, but it's not enough, I think, at the moment to pull in Bettini, who's on his way to try and get the stage victory. And this is the first time we've been in since 1965. Now, 1965, the Tour de France had 22 stages, and the stage distance total was 4,188. This year we're doing 21 stages for 3,400 kilometres, so you can see it's got somewhat shorter now this time, and it's run by Gimondi. But the interesting about that year, 1965, was that was the year then that Tommy Simpson beat Rudy Altig in the sprint for the World Championships in Spain. And I had a quick word with Rudy Altig just down the road. Hello? Okay, tell me when you...
Well, we seem to be having some problems. Are you still hearing me, David?
I can hear you, but I think you've lost me and or our picture or something, Mike. So you go on and call me when they're ready. Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, we
okay.
thought so. It's a low-flying aircraft.
Well, thanks, David. Our apologies once again to all of you viewers out there, because we've had all sorts of technical problems in our communications between the studios in Paris and, of course, live on site at the finish at Aix-les-Thermes. So, for the moment, I'll carry on. Why not? I think you've got the situation. We've got Paolo Bettini for the Mappi team still out in front, and that little chasing group not too far behind. Last check was about 1 minute and 20 seconds or so, and I think it's still coming down actually as we get another look at the 2 chasers, Cardenas and Echevarria. Stuart O'Grady long gone back to the peloton, but I think he's probably well satisfied with what he's done so far. Maybe it was a deliberate attempt to get some sprint points, or maybe it was just the luck of finding himself out in a little lead group, but it certainly panned out very well for Stuart, because just to recap in case you've just joined, He was in a little trio together with Messrs Cardenas and Echevarria as we see the peloton going under the 25 kilometres to go barrier. And whilst Bettini was first over the line at the second sprint at Belcaire to take the maximum 6 points, O'Grady was allowed by Cardenas and Echevarria to go over the line at the front of that little trio to take second place and gain more valuable sprint points. So on we go into the last 25 kilometres. I've just been having a little look at the schedule that we get. We have a booklet which gives us details of all the times, and they are actually 10 minutes down on the slowest schedule today, predominantly because, of course, they've been travelling from east to west, and they've been into this headwind for some considerable time, and Paolo Bettini's done very well to stay away for so long. He went away, initially, of course, not on his own, at 73 kilometres. His maximum lead was 4 minutes 10. As you see now, it has come down ever so slightly. This is on the peloton, mind you, 3 minutes 55. That's on the peloton. There are riders in between. There's Cardenas and Echevarria, of course, only about a minute and 15, a minute and 20 behind. And we've now got that little chasing trio. I think they're still out in front with Michele Bartoli, the Italian ace and former World Cup winner, in there somewhere. There you get a view of the head of the peloton, and it's still, isn't it, still the US Postal Boys driving it here, trying their best to keep control of things here, make sure. There's the blackboard man showing them exactly what the gaps are. He has a fantastic job to do, that guy. The motorbike man, the blackboard man, they zip up and down between the leaders and all the other groups and the peloton and show them by way of that blackboard just what the current position is. Not all the riders, despite this modern age of technology, they're not all wired for sound. Most of the team leaders are, other selected riders are, and so they're in touch with their own team manager back in the cars, but not all of them, and some of them actually don't like it. I'm not sure I would like it actually, but there you are. I'm not a Tour de France rider, am I? Not all of them are wired for sound, and therefore that blackboard man who shows the latest time checks on the board is a very, very important part of any major stage race. So Bettini, whether he's wired for sound or not, I think I did actually see an earpiece on his right here. You can't see it on that side, obviously. I'm fairly certain that Bettini is wired for sound, but even if he were not, he would know exactly just what the gap is between himself and the chasers, any little groups of chasers, and the main peloton, the main group of riders. And there's the two riders next behind him coming up this last climb before the biggie at the finish. The two chasers. In the green jersey you've got Cardenas, and in the orange jersey you've got Echevarria, David Echevarria on the right hand side of the picture. He'll get a lot of support in this neck of the woods because we're almost in Basque territory. The Spanish border not many miles or kilometres away, and there'll be a lot of his fans around, and fans too for the other Spanish rider as well, a genuine Spanish rider. We had an email from someone, I can't remember who it was now, said please distinguish between those who are Spanish and those who are Basque, as if the Basque area were a separate country. Well, of course, the Basque separatists would like it to be a separate country, wouldn't they? And sadly there are some extremists who regularly cause some very, very serious bother in and around various parts of Spain. I wish these extremists wouldn't do it. There are better ways of going about winning your case than that. Anyway, keep the politics out of it, Michael. Stick to the cycling. Yes, Paolo Bettini still going ever so nicely, this compact little rider, small size frame because he's only a smallish rider anyway, as David was pointing out in his commentary earlier. Still nice sunny weather, as you see. It's been a real pleasant change here down in the Pyrenees, and a lot of the riders, particularly the Spaniards of course, will be very, very happy that they've got down to the better weather. And also Jan Ullrich, this is very interesting, you know, because Jan Ullrich does prefer the sun on his back. There's some riders who do, some riders who don't, but I would have thought that Lance Armstrong, his main rival obviously, would be well used to that anyhow, coming from Texas as he does. And maybe the sun doesn't always shine in Texas, but it's a pretty warm sort of neck of the woods, isn't it? So I would imagine that he's pretty used to it, and Lance has lived in recent years down on the Côte d'Azur, just outside Nice and Monte Carlo, so plenty of sunshine there, good training weather when he's not racing. And here we see this little chasing trio of Gutierrez, Demabe and Bartoli. I haven't seen a time check on them for the last few minutes. The last time I saw it, they were still, thank you, it was 3 minutes, it's now down to 2 minutes 20, so they are beginning to close up, not only on Cardenas and Echevarria, but also on Bettini. Now one wonders whether these 6 might all come together for the start of the final climb. Stuart O'Grady there, who I think, just to reiterate what I was saying earlier, in case somebody else has just tuned in, he got some vital sprint points in Belcaire. Just 4, but that's enough. He'll be very happy with that. It was a brave effort for him to stay at the front over the first category climb, the Col de Joux, and then over the Col du Coudon a little bit later on, and then on to that sprint where he gained 4 vital points to just extend his lead over Eric Zabel in the sprinters competition just a little bit more. Look at all the camper vans. These people will have been out here, you know, probably some of them for at least 24 hours. They'll have slept here last night. They pick their spot. They get the cooker going. They put the dish. Some of them have the television aerials or the satellite dishes these days on the roofs of their vans so that they can switch on, keep in touch. Hopefully they're watching it on Eurosport. Keep in touch with the latest situation even before the race arrives at their point. And that's where we are right now, just approaching the top of the Col de Joux. It's not a particularly hard climb, but you know, when you've already done 100 odd kilometres, even a slight incline can sometimes feel like an hors categorie climb. And there, I think that banner will be the top, and that'll spur Bettini on. More mountain points for him at the top of this. This is the 4th King of the Mountains climb of the day that he's going over. There we are, the champion banner at the top, and Bettini is the top of the champion of that particular mountain climb, so more points for him. This will all help to just lift him a few places up, although these are minor climbs and therefore not huge points to be won for being first on top of these. Not to worry. The big one lies ahead, and did you see that brief glimpse of the snow on top of the mountains? Gosh. Even though it's July, there are some mountains up high up in the Pyrenees, 10,000, 11,000 feet above sea level, the highest peaks, and some of them are snowbound all the way through the summer. Yes, even in the heat of the summer, up at 10 and 11,000 feet, it can be quite cool enough to keep the snow lying on those upper slopes. Now then, is there going to be a sprint here, or will they just ride over it? Well, Cardenas, very cool. Cardenas just going over the top then in 2nd place ahead of Echevarria, and Cardenas very interestingly putting on his crash helmet for the descent. We've already had one bad crash on an earlier descent, remember, after the first King of the Mountains climb over the Col de Joux. Sadly, Ivanov and de Groot crashing out of this Tour de France on the descent. Both hospital cases. De Groot at first was thought to be quite serious actually, but thankfully, if you missed the mention earlier on, things are not quite as serious as we first heard, and neither of them have life-threatening injuries, although at first it really did look quite bad, it has to be said, but often these things are. And anyway, we keep our fingers crossed for them, and we'll perhaps be able to update you more on their progress after we've had maybe some news overnight. And if you're tuning in tomorrow when we cover the stage up to Saint-Lary-Soulan, perhaps we'll give you some up-to-date reports on their progress. Hope that it's good. So the leaders then already on the descent, and now here there is a descent. Remember, they've been climbing for many kilometres, ever since the feed more or less at 100 kilometres, all the way up to here, 146. There's hardly been a yard or a metre of downhill really. But here comes the chase group now behind Bettini, Cardenas and Echevarria. These 3 are Demarbey, Bartoli and Gutierrez. And over the top they go, and there's a fair old descent now. They rattle down to the bottom of the valley where they get to the town of Ax-les-Thermes. And although technically we're talking about the finish being at Ax-les-Thermes, to give it its full title is Ax-les-Thermes Plateau de Bonasque, which is the ski resort above the town. It's about 10 or 11 kilometres above in terms of driving the road up to the top. Well, the poursuivant, 46 seconds. So Cardenas and Echevarria at the top, only 46 seconds behind. The 3 chasers have now closed to within 2 minutes and 2. Now, depending upon how good they descend, and I know Michele Bartoli, the Italian, is particularly a good descender, I wonder whether those 3 might just close the gap. And this is quite a long downhill, as I said before. They've just climbed up to 1,431 metres above sea level. And Ax-les-Thermes, the town in the valley, is only 765. So more or less 700 metres, which is what, about 2,300 feet of descent. And there you've got it on your screen. You see how it comes down. In places it's 1 in 10 at first, 10% is 1 in 10, 9%, well that's about 1 in 11 in English terms, and then it gradually eases off ever so slightly lower down to just 5%, 6.5%, not too bad. And of course that is the springboard there where the line's got to at the bottom at the town of Axley-Thames for the riders to swing off up to the final climb through the town and onto the final climb up to the stage finish, the Plateau de Banos. It's just looking at my notes, the actual climb itself is listed as 9.1 kilometres at an average of 7.2. Now if you think average of 7.2, that doesn't sound too bad, does it? But think of this, it's 9 kilometres, that's almost 6 miles, and if the average is 7.2%, then what is the steepest? We may well get a profile of that later on as you see Bettini in the crouch position, shall we say, trying to get as much speed as possible on the descent. Long descent, and these riders are really going lickety-split down here, my goodness. Shades of Robert Miller, who always treated this as his home territory when he was racing for the King of the Mountains jersey in the Pyrenees. Now look at this, this is a very significant statistic, I think. The time gained by Lance Armstrong after just 2 mountain stages. He gained almost 3 minutes on his main rival, Ulrich. He gained 3 3/4 on Jose Balocchi, who made the podium last year. Little Oscar Sevilla, the newcomer from Spain, a great prospect he is. Even he lost over 5 minutes to Armstrong, as did Morrow, who sadly is now out of the race. He climbed out off his bike early on this morning. Manchego, last year's King of the Mountains winner. What's happened to him? I thought he'd do really well this year, but he's not having a good tour. He's lost 9 minutes and everybody else has lost 10 minutes or more on Lance Armstrong in just those 2 alpine stages. The climb to L'Alpe d'Huez, remember, and then the mountain time trial. Now here's this ongoing statistic which we've been giving you throughout the tour, based on Lance Armstrong as the benchmark. Only Simon and Kivalev are in front of him, of course, and all the other big names, barring Morrow, who's gone out of the picture now. Belocchi is at 3 minutes 10, Ulrich at 3 minutes 34, Oscar Sevilla at 6 minutes, Botero at 8, and everybody else into double figures. That gives you an idea of just what the situation is now as far as the big names are concerned. Back to live pictures then, as Bettini continues his way, thundering down this long, long descent. Boy, some of these turns, oh wow, you've got to be careful around these, haven't you? And many's the time we've seen riders come adrift, and I think that's what might well have happened earlier on to Ivanov and de Groot. It's always better though for this, a guy on his own, he can pick his own line round the corner. You don't have to follow anybody's wheel, you don't have to worry about somebody making an unexpected little braking movement. You can just pick your own line, go at your own speed, and I should imagine that's just how Bettini likes it really. Out in front, he's won the last 2 King of the Mountains climbs on his own, and he's really going lickety-split down towards the final big climb of the day to the stage finish. Our internet question today, once again, if you want to give us a call, will we see an Italian in the top 10 at the end of this race? You're watching an Italian now, leading this 12th stage, but when we get to Paris a week on Sunday, do you think there will be an Italian in the top 10 overall? Yes or no on Eurosport.com. And just a reminder, in case you're just floundering around a little at home, just a reminder that the leading Italian at the moment is Stefano Garzelli, last year's Giro d'Italia winner. The Mappy man is lying in 17th place at 26 minutes and 20 seconds, with Vladimir Belli, the next Italian, who is 20th. Well, our camera's focusing very much on the race leader here. He'd love, I know, to start the climb on his own, but he must have seen the time checks. I went on a bit earlier about the blackboard man. He'll know what the time checks are. He'll know, for instance, that Cardenas and Echevarria are quite clearly closing him down now, and David Echevarria is just as good a climber, in my opinion, as Bettini is. And Cardenas is not bad. All the Kelby riders are. Here's Cardenas. Look at this. Look at that for a way of descending. We've often seen these extreme positions, haven't we? Some of the riders actually poke their nose right over the front wheel, way off the saddle, and just lie with the chest practically on the handlebars, as it were. And to me it looks lethal, but well, they somehow manage it, don't they? But if they could get a more aerodynamic position to up the pace from, say, 45 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour, then fine. Because when you're going at that sort of speed, you see, even with the big gears, and here we've got some idea, if it just stopped the camera shake, it looked like it was about 80 kilometres, which is almost 50 miles an hour, and that's a bit quick. When you're getting to that sort of speed, even with the big gears that these riders have available on the modern bikes, with the 52 or sometimes these days quite often 53 tooth chain rings, and the 11 sprockets at the back, a tiny little sprocket which gives you a bigger gear, even with gears as big as that, once you're up to about 50 plus miles an hour, and that's not uncommon on the longer straights, which you get more in the Alps than the Pyrenees, there's no point in pedalling. You just can't, you're going far too fast to pedal. So you've just got to tuck yourself in, get the most aerodynamic position, and if you've got the confidence to do it, as most of these top professionals have, then you just let the bike go. And pray you don't get a front wheel blowout, of course, because heaven forbid, if that were to happen at 50 mile an hour or whatever, well, it's too awful to contemplate, isn't it? Down through these villages. I was once descending on my bike in Las Americas some years ago with a mate of mine, and we came through a little village. The road was even tighter than that, actually, and we were going a bit quick, and a dog came leaping out from a little side entrance somewhere, I don't know, and for a split second my heart was in my mouth, and then the dog just as quickly jerked back again, and in that split second I saw that it was, fortunately for me and for my friend, it was actually on a lead just as well, because it leapt out and the lead automatically whacked it back again. Fortunately, I feared for the dog and its neck, but I was more thankful that it was on the lead, because otherwise it might have leapt out, hit us, and goodness knows what would have happened. And let's hope that any dogs that belong to these people here are safely on leads as the riders come belting through. Paolo Bettini then getting the cheers of the crowd here as he comes down towards the bottom of this climb. He's got a little way to go yet before he sets off for the big climb. Still down in the valley here for a little while, and there you see the river in the valley as they go through Ax-les-Thermes, and then there's just this big climb to go. And a nice town to look at from the aerial shot, isn't it? The river valley, the road going alongside it. No time for Paolo Bettini or indeed any of the other riders to admire the view. And isn't it wonderful? This sort of atmosphere on a major bike race is something that you've just got to soak in, isn't it? You know, all these people who've waited, some of them will have waited for hours and hours. The roads will have been closed for some time, so they will have had to pick their position and just wait there. Some of them bring out their tables, their chairs, the bottle of wine, the cheese, and just make a day of it. And it was nice a few years ago when the Tour de France came to England, southern England. We had a couple of stages. I was fortunate enough to be one of the commentators on those two stages down south. Arrival in 8 kilometres now, so here the big climb begins, and Bettini started it on his own. And it was so nice that the British people, and a lot of whom are not particularly bike friendly, I use that in the broadest of terms, they did actually take the Tour de France, the two stages in England, very much to their heart. And I saw, as I was going along the course, first thing in the morning on both the days, Cardenas chasing hard now after Bettini. I saw lots of people making it look like we were in France. Some of them had dressed up in French sort of, you know, with the black berets, sort of striped shirts, and some had tables and chairs. And if I didn't look too closely, I'd have sworn I was actually in some part of France on that particular day. And let's hope if ever the Tour de France does get a chance to come to England again, that the people of England, or Britain, why not? They've been to Ireland as well, of course, in more recent times, that they take it to their heart once again. Now, I believe we are going to see the profile of this last climb, as we see Echevarria now setting off in pursuit of Paolo Bettini on this last climb of this 12th stage. Oh, and with an accident there, and that's a Cofidis rider on his feet, but that looks like a Lotto rider in the shadow. And has he banged his head against that wall on the corner? If he has, he could be in trouble. Let's have a little look at this. Oh, and it came off on the corner. Oh my goodness, that could be nasty. The Cofidis rider was first off, and the Lotto, I'm fairly certain that's a Lotto rider, just clouted into him. Yes, it is, and went over him into that wall, and that could well be a very nasty tumble, hitting the wall like that. Wow, I was just looking for the rider's number to try and identify him for you. Lotto team will be quickly on the spot there. Well, we've had one or two nasties already. It looks like the Cofidis man is getting a fresh bike, but I'm more concerned about the Lotto rider. We've had two nasty accident, well, one nasty accident with two riders, Ivanov and de Groot earlier today, and we don't want any more, but sadly that's the nature of professional bike racing, isn't it? There's the agony and there's the ecstasy. And look at this now, Echevarria just putting a little bit of distance between himself and Cardenas here. Cardenas really struggling to stay with David Echevarria. And here's that profile. Now, I said that it's averaged some 7.2%, but there you see it starts 9.5, then not too bad 5%, but then two stretches of 10% right in the middle. That's 1 in 10, and look at that, from 3.5 kilometres to 6 kilometres, 2.5 kilometres, which is what, 1 3/4 miles maybe of 1 in 10. That's pretty hard going. 1 in 10 higher up, and then thankfully for the last kilometre it's more or less flat up on the top of that ski resort. Well, Cardenas has managed to get back to Echevarria, but remember that up the road still is the stage leader Paolo Bettini. Bettini then still on his own. I haven't seen a time check for a little while, but Cardenas, here he is, our leader. Cardenas and Echevarria certainly not too far behind him, I would think. Now then, fella, can you do this? 9 kilometres, just a little under 6 miles in English money. One of my favourite riders, Bettini. I wonder whether he'll be able to hang on and take this stage victory into Ax-les-Thermes. Well, he won't be lacking for support all the way up this climb now, Bettini. But can he hang on? He's been out in front for quite some considerable time now, searching for his first ever stage victory, I think, in the Tour de France. I'm just checking my records to make sure. No, of course, he won in Dax last year, didn't he? Yes, of course. So his second stage victory. Now, I'm just getting some very interesting news over my headphones, folks, and I was just contemplating when we might have some action, and I've just heard that Jan Ullrich is trying to attack Armstrong. Now, remember, we've got two totally separate battles here. We've got the battle up front for the stage victory. And remember, there's 50,000 francs for a stage win. That's £5,000, not to be sniffed at every day. But behind them, of course, behind the battle for the stage is the battle for the ultimate glory on the Champs-Elysees on Sunday. And I've just heard news that Jan Ullrich is trying to attack Armstrong. Now, you heard what he said if you saw the interview that he gave at the press conference on the rest day in Perpignan. He said, "I've come here to win the Tour de France. I still feel confident." And Armstrong, although we're not getting the pictures of the peloton yet, Armstrong has managed to nullify the first attack by Ullrich. Back in the peloton, and there we see it, Ullrich and Armstrong right on his wheel. Now, this is the real battle for the Tour de France. No disrespect to Paolo Bettini or Cardenas or Echevarria. They are going for the stage glory, and good luck to them. But here you've got the big battle for the top spot on the Champs-Elysees. Away goes the cap from Lance Armstrong. He doesn't want to get too hot, and remember, this is quite a warm day. Ullrich promised he would attack. He said that in his interview. Armstrong has been prepared for this. Of course, Armstrong in his turn, remember, the day before Alpe d'Huez, Armstrong said, "I'm going to attack." He didn't make any secret of it, and now Ullrich has turned the tables, and back in the peloton, Ullrich has come out in front, and he's gone on the attack. But Armstrong, look, he's right there, and so too is the man who they both somehow have to get rid of. This is Andrei Kivilev from the Cofidis team, who is, of course, in second place on general classification as a result of that long break some days ago now in the rain, when Kivilev and 13 other riders gained nearly 36 minutes. And as a result of that, François Simon, Andrei Kivilev and Stuart O'Grady at the time, of course, found themselves with masses and masses of lead on the main names, the big names. And the problem then was, how were Armstrong, Ullrich, Morrow, who's now gone, Belocchi and the rest, how were they going to pull that time back? We knew they'd have to do it bit by bit, steady and steady. We couldn't do it all in one day, certainly. And now we see a big effort from Ulrich and Armstrong to try and distance Kovalev. Now, Kovalev started the day 11 minutes and 1 second down on Simon, the leader, with Armstrong at 13 minutes and 7, so a total gap between Kovalev and Armstrong and 2 minutes and 6 seconds. So if these two guys can drop Kovalev by 2 minutes or more, Armstrong will go up into second place, and of course it remains to be seen what happens to Francois Simon. Will he crack on this climb or will he not? Now that rider you see there is Sébastien Demarbay, who is was one of a chasing trio along with Guterres and Bartoli. Demarbay has now been caught back, and these two guys are clearly going to forge on now, and this is going to be, I'm sure, over these closing kilometres to the top at Aix-les-Thermes, another of those epic battles like we saw at Mont Ventoux last year between Armstrong and the little Italian fella himself, the pirate, who of course is not in the race this year, Pantani. Well, Armstrong has the odds in his favour here. It's up to Ulrich to make the pace, of course. If Armstrong can stay on his wheel, that's all he has to do. He doesn't have to counter-attack Ulrich. Remember, he's got 3 minutes in hand on Jan Ulrich, more, over 3 minutes. So Ulrich really is on a hiding to nothing here. He's got to do this. He's got to try somehow to wear Armstrong down. As we go back now to Laurent Jalabert, who looks as though he's finding the pace just a little bit tough. Jaja, of course, had 2 stage wins in the first week of this tour. The former world time trial champion, the darling of the French. And well, I can't believe that they've caught Bettini up so quickly. Goodness me, these two guys are flying. The big two names who finished in first and second places on the podium last year. That really is astonishing, surely not. Well, it looks like it was. I can't believe that he's come back so quickly. Here's what the guys who were chasing, Cardenas and Echevarria. No, there's Bettini. I thought that was a little bit too much to expect. Bettini, though, has now been caught by Cardenas and Echevarria. I think it must be Michele Bartoli. It's Bartoli. Bartoli sitting on the wheel. Yes, there they catch. We didn't see that little bit earlier. Bartoli catching Armstrong, and a little bit of recognition there momentarily from Armstrong as he goes to the front ahead of Jan Ulrich. Meantime, the yellow jersey must try to survive up these 9 kilometres of climbing to the finish at the ski resort above Aix-les-Thermes. This is going to be a real war of attrition now for him. He's got enough in hand, really, you would think, to hang on to the jersey for another day. Armstrong, surely, even Lance Armstrong isn't going to take 13 minutes out of him on this climb, or is he? It depends just how much he falls apart at the back there. Well, Bartoli now not able to hang on. No, we're back to Bettini, and we're looking now at a big move by David Echevarria, and also now Cardenas. Now Cardenas and Echevarria now have 50 metres between them, and it's growing and growing and growing. The Armstrong group 1 minute behind, and now Cardenas goes up the road in a bid to stay clear of the big names behind him. The little Kelmy rider from Colombia, Felix Cardenas. Well, this would be a famous victory. It wouldn't be the first time we've seen a Colombian do this sort of thing. But it's still a long way up to the top of this climb. Cardenas coming up to the next banner, which tells him he still has another 5,000 metres of racing to go. Cardenas then, from Colombia, can he hang on and hold off Armstrong and Ulrich? And there you see Bartoli's bid to stay with the big two has finally ended. Even the mighty Michele Bartoli, winner of classics, winner of the World Cup, Italian champion, and even Michele Bartoli cannot hang on to Messrs Ulrich and Armstrong, as we see these two guys, the big two of last year's tour, and once again proving to be the big two of this year's tour. And now all they have ahead of them are Cardenas and Echevarria and Bettini. Well, there they go under the 5 kilometre banner, and it's not been too long, has it, since we saw Cardenas go under there, so they cannot be very, very far off them now. And maybe on one of the straights, although there aren't too many on here, they might well be able to see up the road where the last riders are who can deny them a possible epic 1-2 at the top. But Cardenas might fancy just another game plan here. And if he had a minute or so last time, 5 kilometres, well, it's still well over 10 minutes. It's between 10 and 15 minutes of racing yet. And 1 minute at this sort of level, he could do with a little bit more. It might even be less than that, Cardenas. He's not won a race so far this season. Best placing so far was a month or so ago when he was 4th in the Classique des Alpes. The little Colombian looking good now, though. Like the Spaniards, the Colombians always seem to produce good little riders. And of course, Kelmy have 2 of them. This fella and the man who won the King of the Mountains competition in the Tour de France last year, Santiago Botero, who's been a bit of a disappointment so far this year. I had him down when we did the straw poll, you might recall if you were listening that day. I had him down, silly me, to win the stage up to Alpe d'Huez, and I wasn't the only one. I think even Sean Kelly himself, who should know about these things, even Sean had him down for that win as well. But of course, as we know, Armstrong was just in mercurial form both on that day and the next day, the last day before the rest day. And here we see them catching up now with Paolo Bettini. Bettini's bid, he's been out in front for so long, but it's finally come to an end. The Italian almost at a standstill compared with these two, and they're just going to go straight past Bettini. I doubt very, very much whether he will have enough. We'll see. He might make a little attempt. After all, he is a good climber, but there are good climbers and there are great climbers. Now then, let's see whether he can tuck into Armstrong's back wheel for a little while. 4 kilometres remaining of this race. Well, he's hanging on in there for a little while. And meantime, just look at this peloton and the yellow jersey hanging on for grim death now. Come on, Francois. Remember your brothers. They've all done good things in the Tour de France. 3 of them, the older 3 brothers, all won stages in the Tour de France. One of them won the yellow jersey in the Tour de France and had to retire from the Tour, sadly, with the jersey on his back. Now then, here we have Echevarria coming back just a little bit on Armstrong and Ulrich. And he really is giving it everything he's got, David Echevarria. Meantime, 4 kilometres to go. Felix Cardenas, the Colombian, riding in the Kelmy Costa Blanca Eurosport colours. Just 4,000 metres in a track pursuit. That would be a little more than 4.5 minutes at the most. But up a mountain like this, well, something different again. Paolo Bettini and David Echevarria trying so hard to hang on to Ulrich and Armstrong, but Ulrich has not broken Armstrong. This is the crucial thing. Ulrich really has these 3 mountain stages, today, tomorrow and Sunday. He's got to somehow try to break Armstrong, because if he comes out of the Pyrenees still with a 3-minute deficit, there's only the long time trial to come, which is in the middle of next week. It's just checking my little book now. It's on Friday, isn't it? 2 days before we get to Paris. 61 kilometres from Montluçon to Saint-Amand-Montrond in central France, just off the top of the Massif Central. And you'd have to favour Armstrong to take that one as well. Certainly, even if Ulrich were to win it, it would be a mammoth surprise if he were to take 3 minutes or more out of Lance Armstrong. Now then, the Euskaltel rider having a go there and trying to counter-attack. And I've been calling him David Echevarria for the last couple of kilometres. I must sit corrected, because I've just been through my notes and realised that I've been calling Roberto Laiseca David Echevarria. Echevarria went back a little while ago and was promptly replaced by Roberto Laiseca. So my apologies for misleading you there. We've been watching the same rider, or seemingly the same jersey anyway, for mile after mile, kilometre after kilometre, and in my excitement I overlooked the fact that Laiseca had come up from behind and replaced David Echevarria. So it's now Laiseca counter-attacking, and at the moment he's in second place on this stage. Armstrong still looking to be in control of the situation, happy at the moment to sit with Ulrich. Remember, Ulrich's the man who's got to somehow break him. Now then, here's another interesting man. This is the man who finished in third place last year in Paris, Joseba Bellocchi for the Once team. Bellocchi now trying to come up to the leaders on this stage. Good little climber again, Bellocchi. There's not much of him to look at physically. One of the pure climbers. Ulrich and Armstrong aren't what you would call pure climbers, and yet they're giving all these so-called little fellas, the pure climbers, a real run for the money. The Basque flag flying there. Well, they've just seen one of the Basque riders, Roberto Laiseca, go up the road, and there you see him in the distance. There's an overhead shot of Laiseca, who replaced Echevarria. One went back just as the other came forward, hence my mistake. Please forgive me for that one. Laiseca then is now in second place. Armstrong and Ulrich third and fourth on the road at the moment as we get ever nearer to the top in Aix-les-Thermes. And still Ulrich has not cracked the American. Here we see Oscar Sevilla coming up now. Bellocchi and Sevilla. Sevilla really is having a superb tour. He's only just 25 years of age. He's wearing the white jersey of leading young rider. And he really has proved quite a sensation. He was 5th in the time trial a couple of days ago. It bumped him up to 8th place overall. And we're in the last 3 kilometres of this climb. Well, this is an epic battle between these two big men. Ulrich, who won the Tour in 1997, Armstrong, who won it in 1999 and again in 2000. Meantime, up the road, Cardenas, Felix Cardenas, the little Kelmy man from Colombia, could possibly... Can Ulrich close the gap? Can any of the others close the gap? This fella's got the bit between his teeth here, hasn't he? And Cardenas still looks full of fight as he gets higher up the climb now and ever nearer to the finish. This would be his first victory of the season, and certainly his first Tour victory. Behind, more of the Euskaltel team now. Armstrong, you've got to say, he looks so cool and so in control, doesn't he? Even going past, as if to say to Ulrich, look, I'm not in any trouble at all. You want me to go to the front? I'm happy to go to the front. You've not got me in any trouble at all. This is a battle, as much a physical one as a mental one as well, because there's a great sort of psychological game here between these two. Well, apparently the lead is now around about 40 seconds between Felix Cardenas here, who's going under the 2 kilometre banner, and Armstrong and Ulrich. Can he hang on? Don't go away. Stay right with us for these last 2 kilometres of this stage up to Aix-les-Thermes, the Plateau de Bonasque at the top. Now remember, the last kilometre is virtually flat, so Cardenas only has to climb roughly 1 more kilometre, and then the worst of his efforts are over. Meantime, as you see, the two main protagonists still have 2 kilometres to go. Now here's the approach. As they swing round very, very sharp to the right, they'll go under the red kite. Now from there on, were built in recent years to make this a successful ski resort. It's pretty well flat as they curve round there towards the finish. That last kilometre is more or less flat. And at the moment you see them coming up that bottom bit, which has disappeared from our screen now, or at least Cardenas is anyway. Cardenas is already on that last kilometre of climbing, and once he gets to the red kite, he will know for sure that he has finished his climbing for the day. So only another few hundred metres of climbing, and he's gasping for all the oxygen he can get into his lungs here. This really is a great effort by the Kelmy Costa Blanca Eurosport rider, Felix Cardenas from Colombia. Meantime, the big battle behind for overall glory in Paris, and still Ulrich has been forced to go on the attack. He said he would. He said he's come here to win the Tour. He wouldn't give up, but everything that he's done on this last big climb, it's a first category climb, has been matched by Armstrong, who you have to say looks in superb form. And this will be a hammer blow to Ulrich's morale. And Armstrong is putting the hammer down even more. Can you believe this? He doesn't need to do this. All he had to do to maintain the margin was stay with Ulrich, but no, that's not enough. The Texan wants more. The Texan's got more in his legs. Lance Armstrong on the attack against Jan Ulrich, his main rival. This is a whole new dimension of Lance Armstrong. Okay, he's already won 2 Tours de France, and that is glory enough surely for any man. And having done all he needed to do in the Alps, here we are in the Pyrenees, and Armstrong is trying to put even more time between himself and the German champion, Jan Ulrich. Ulrich is mouth wide open, straining for every breath, watching Armstrong disappear in front of him. Armstrong, 1 kilometre to go, and he may not win the stage. That won't matter to him. It didn't matter last year when he attacked all the big names and saw Javier Ochoa stay in front of him to the top of the climb. It didn't matter. He did what he had to do. The Ochoa took the stage, and it might well turn out to be the same this time, because I think that Lyseca now, having climbed the climb inside the last kilometre, Cardenas may well now be able to hang on and take the stage victory. But that won't matter one little bit to Lance Armstrong if he pulls off even more time between himself and Jan Ulrich. But for the moment, let's just see Felix Cardenas coming home inside the last 500 metres now. It's pretty well all flat. It continues to swing round to the left. He can see the Fiat signs knocking off the yards, the metres I should say. He's gone past the 400 to go. He must be just about up to the 300 to go now. It continues to curve round. There's 250 to go. And Felix Cardenas from Kelmy is going to come home to score his first ever stage win in the Tour de France, his first victory of 2001. But behind him, what an epic performance once again from Lance Armstrong. Over 5 hours in the saddle for these riders. It's always a grueling test in the mountains when you're asked to go uphill, down dale for more than 5 hours. Felix Cardenas for Kelmy Costa Blanca Eurosport wins the stage to Ax-les-Thermes, Plateau-les de Bonasque, and what a famous victory that is for his Kelmy team, who had such a good tour last year and of course succeeded in winning the team competition at the end of the day. Lyseca coming home just ahead of Armstrong, and would you believe it, he has held on to that lead, that incredible attack on Jan Ulrich in the closing stages, has put even more time between himself and the German. And I'll tell you something, Ulrich will be on fire tonight. He'll be furious with that. He's lost about another 20-odd seconds, I think, between himself and Armstrong. And this looks like David Echevarria coming through. It is indeed. So Echevarria, who got blown out just a little bit towards the end, coming home just ahead of Sevilla and Bellocchi. Oscar Sevilla continuing to do ever so well in his first ever Tour de France. Meantime, lower down the hill, the yellow jersey has to come home within 13 minutes of Lance Armstrong to hang on to that jersey. I'm fairly certain he'll do that. I don't think he's going to lose 13 minutes. Meantime, still more of the riders finishing. Another of the Kelmys coming through. And a big sprint. Oh, Michael Bulgett's come right up as well to get a reasonable placing. Only about a minute and a half behind. So the net result of that is that Lance Armstrong is even further in front of his main rivals than ever before, and now the countdown is on to see how much time he has gained over Simon and Kovalev. I was looking for the Cofidis jersey, and I thought there's Paolo Bettini, finishing 2 minutes in arrears. I don't think he'll mind. He's had a good day. He can feel proud of himself. I was just looking in that largest group. Michael Boget came in towards the front of it. I suspected I saw a Cofidis jersey, and that might well have been Andrei Kovalev. But Kovalev was only 2 minutes and 6 seconds ahead of Lance Armstrong this morning, as we see Cardenas crossing the line once again. Will he hang on to runner-up spot? Will Seymour still be in yellow? Well, massive crowds on the higher parts of the climb here at the top of Ax-les-Thermes, and groups coming in, big ones, small ones, all having lost time to the big men. As we see still more of the riders coming over the line at the top. Still only 3 minutes though since the stage winner crossed the line. Now Lance Armstrong crossed the line at something like 20 odd seconds after Cardenas. The crucial thing now is, was Kovalev in that group, in which case he might just have hung on ahead of Armstrong in the overall classification. But Francois Simon in the yellow jersey losing time all the time now. His lead is rapidly being whittled away. He's not in that group. And 3 minutes and 36 seconds, 37 have already gone through. And he's still some way down the mountain. Remember, he began this morning with 13 minutes and 7 seconds in hand. I'm sure he'll cross the finishing line within that time gap, actually, to hang on to yellow. And here he comes! He's in the middle of this group, and there is the yellow jersey. So 4 minutes have gone, so he's had a pretty fair day. He'll be well pleased with that. Francois Simon for France hangs on to the yellow jersey for yet another day. Well, this is a fairly modern ski resort at Ax-les-Thermes. There are many of them now which have sprung up in the last 10 or 20 years, and Felix Cardenas will remember it for many, many years to come. That was the day I climbed up to the top of Ax-les-Thermes and gained my first Tour de France stage victory. And it did feel sweet, doesn't it always? The first one is always the sweetest. So a great glory day for the little Colombian. But Lance Armstrong, well, he followed, and then 2 or 3 kilometres from the end, poof, off he went. And that was quite an incredible thing. He didn't really need to do it, in my opinion. He could have just stuck with Ulrich to the end and hung on to his 3.5-minute lead over his German rival. But no, he wasn't happy with that. He wanted to make it still more. There's Ludo Dierksens coming in for Lampre. You can always tell him, the shaven head. And what a glorious day it is. Laurent Jalabert coming up. Well, he had his glory, of course, during the first week of the Tour de France with 2 great stage wins, including that one on Bastille Day, sending the French home in raptures. But Jaja losing 5.5 minutes to Cardenas on the stage. But he'll still be up there in a good position overall, lying in 11th at the start of play, some 25 minutes behind Simon. Well, he's lost a little bit more to Simon, but other riders higher up the classification have lost more time. I haven't seen Stuart O'Grady cross the line yet, but there's official confirmation of the stage. Cardenas, Leiseca, Armstrong, Ulrich, Echevarria, Sevilla, Bellocchi, Botero just beating Boget in that little group, and Vinokurov making the top 10 at the end of the stage. Botero, bit of a disappointment. Michael Boget still trying to find the form that we saw from him back in 1998. And Andrei Vinokurov, well, he has to do a lot of work in the earlier parts of the stage for his team captain, of course, Jan Ulrich. lower down, Garzelli finishing in 11th, and the time gap's creeping up there when you get down to Roberto Heras and Kivalev, the Kazakhstani, at 1:42. They've lost a little bit more time on the leaders, but a lot of them have had hard work to do. The interesting thing for Kivalev there, coming in at that sort of time gap, he's lost a little bit more time, but by my calculations, he'll still hang on to second place, just, I think, from Lance Armstrong. Behind Simon and ahead of Lance Armstrong in the general classification. The time gaps will have changed. Armstrong will be ever nearer, but it wasn't to be for a stage win. That went to Felix Cardenas of Colombia. Lyseca, I remember saying a week ago that I fancied the looks of this guy. He's always got a determined look. He's had several major placings already so far this season, still searching for his first win, but always up there or thereabouts. Lance Armstrong, what a fantastic attack that was after Ulrich had tried to attack him lower down the slope. So those, the 1, 2, 3 on this mountain stage, the first of 3 mountain stages in the Pyrenees. The 1, 2, 3, Cardenas, Lyseca and Armstrong. Felix Cardenas enjoying the moment, and why should he not? Notice the Eurosport logo on the jersey. We've been sponsoring the Kelma team through our Spanish section of Eurosport for a few years now, and it's always nice to see the logo up there. Felix Cardenas then, his first Tour de France stage victory here at Ax-les-Thermes on the top of the ski resort, the Plateau de Bonasque. Somebody asked me on an email the other day, why don't we see them spraying champagne over everybody? Well, the answer to that is we stopped having champagne on the podium 2 or 3 years ago because the podium stage winner is sponsored by, would you believe, Coca-Cola, their rival non-alcoholic beverage, and so they get the Coca-Cola trophy, they get a bottle of Coca-Cola, and that's why we don't have champagne. So I hope that's answered an email which I spotted the other day. But there might well be just a snifter of champagne or two this evening, maybe, in the hotel for Felix Cardenas. I don't think his team manager would begrudge him maybe just a glass to say, well done, mate, that was a nice climb, a really lovely effort. And there you see him making the big attack that saw off his rivals, and that at the time was Echevarria, and then Lyseca came up, and it all got confusing in the orange jerseys, didn't it? But we sorted it out in the end, and there we see him higher up the climb, taking the last little drink before getting to the finish line, keeping up the pressure all the way. Armstrong and Ulrich were never all that far behind him, and the gap was closing. I wonder whether he knew just how close they were as he came into the finish, arms aloft in the traditional victory salute. And just look at these vast valleys and mountains, snow still on the top there. But I'm really thrilled for this fella, Francois Simon. I well remember Pascal Simon, his elder brother, having to retire from the Tour de France in the yellow jersey back in 1983 when he cracked his collarbone and just couldn't carry on. This is one for the Simon family to savour for many, many years. He will not win in Paris. He will not have the yellow jersey more than another day or two at most, I'm sure, and he probably knows that. He's in yellow thanks to that huge break in the terrible weather a few days ago when 14 riders escaped and the peloton didn't feel much like racing. But he's made the most of it. He's hung on, he's battled in there, and I think he's done the yellow jersey proud. And I think we're going to get the general classification. Yes, here's the provisional classification, and look how that gap has come down now. Armstrong, remember, only a few days ago, before he got to Alpe d'Huez, was almost 36 minutes behind Stuart O'Grady, who was then in yellow. Now the gap between him and Simon is only 9 minutes 10. He's still just behind Andrei Kivalev. I thought Kivalev would just hang on, but Ulrich has lost more time to Armstrong. The gap is now 4 minutes and 5 seconds, and that is a huge psychological blow that Armstrong has dealt to Ulrich in doing what he did on this climb. When we look back on this Tour de France, I'm sure that's one of the moments we'll remember. Laurent Roux then I don't think he got many points today because we didn't see much of him out in front. He might have just got one or two perhaps, but more than enough to keep him in the King of the Mountains jersey for another day. The polka dot jersey traditionally worn by the man leading in points gained on the tops of all the mountain climbs. And Laurent Roux has benefited from some good climbing in recent times. He was away on a long loan break just before we took our rest out. It was the climb up to L'Alpe d'Huez, wasn't it? He was away for 199 kilometres and took most of the points going that day. Wearing the red number still, in case you missed my comment on it earlier, as opposed to the normal black on white numbers that all the other riders have, because he's still the leading rider in the most aggressive rider competition. He has been on the attack more than other riders. And here we see one of the back groups coming in now. We haven't got the clock at the bottom. Yes, we have now. 12 minutes gone, and this group all losing that amount of time, and there will still be more riders to come. You can bet your bottom French franc that we haven't seen all the riders over the finish line just yet. 12 minutes is nothing to lose on a stage like this, and tomorrow, believe me, we will see riders coming in over half an hour down when we go to Saint-Lary-Soulan, because it's an awesome stage we've got tomorrow. 194 kilometres, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classified climbs, including the hors category climb, that really tough final climb up to Saint-Lary-Soulan and the Pla d'Adet at the top. Now here's a rider who's rapidly becoming another of my favourites. I know I've got lots of them, but I don't care. There are some riders I like more than others, all right? And this is one of them. Oscar Sevilla, who's only just 25, and he's wearing the white jersey. He looks about 18, doesn't he? And he's wearing the white jersey, signifying that he is the leader in the under-25 competition, the best young rider competition. Manchebo got it last year, and I thought he might get it again this, because he still does qualify. He's still eligible for the under-25 this year, but he's not riding anything like as well as this fella is, and he's another Kelme Costa Blanca Eurosport rider. Oscar Sevilla, the best young rider, and riding a super Tour de France so far, and well, we've still got some way to go, of course, before we get to Paris, but barring accidents, and sadly we've had one bad one, well, two actually that we saw on screen, one involving two retirements, both gone out of the race. Let's hope we don't have too many of those. Sergei Ivanov and Bram de Groot were both involved in an accident on the descent after the first climb earlier today when we were coming down on the Col de Joux, and they sadly came adrift, went into the Armco barrier. One of them ended up on the wrong side of the barrier. They're both in hospital, they're being treated. The injuries are by no means life-threatening, thankfully, and they will be okay, but unfortunately they're out of the race. And just for the record, in case you missed our earlier transmissions, if you've not been with us for all that long, let me remind you that one of the main French riders, Moreau, has retired from the race. I'm afraid he climbed off his bike earlier today. So there we are. So just to wrap up things, a stage win for Felix Cardenas of Kelme, beating Lyseca, Armstrong, Ulrich, Echevarria, Sevilla, Bellocchi, Botero, Boquet and Vinokurov. That's the top 10 so far as the stage is concerned. Felix Cardenas gaining his first ever stage victory in the Tour de France, and there we see him making what proved to be the winning move. But behind him, Armstrong held all the attacks from Ulrich, and then in the final couple of kilometres attacked Ulrich himself in an astonishing move to take still more time out of Ulrich. You've got to say that Armstrong still remains favourite to win this year's Tour de France.